The countdown clock above the throne room door showed 6 minutes, and nobody in that palace was going to stop it. I stood beside Princess Alina with my hand resting near my belt, watching a room full of nobles who would not meet my eyes. 6 minutes until the ritual took her life, and every single one of them had already made peace with it. My name is Owen Blake. I am not royalty. I am not even from this world. I am a hired guard, a human, brought in because my species has a reputation for refusing to die quietly, and someone on this council thought that might be useful for keeping thieves away from the treasury. Nobody expected me to be standing here when the real danger arrived. Nobody expected me to care. "You should step back, Owen," Alina said quietly, her voice steady even though her hands were not. "This is not something you can stop. It was decided before either of us were born." "Funny thing about decisions," I said. "They can be undecided." She almost smiled at that, almost. Let me explain what was happening, because none of it made sense to me either when I first heard it. Alina's empire followed something called the successor's toll. Centuries ago, some long-dead ruler decided that every heir to the throne had to pass through a ceremony at their coming of age, a ritual overseen by the Sentinel Order, keepers of law and tradition. If the Sentinels judged the heir unfit, unworthy, or simply inconvenient to the political balance of the moment, the heir would not survive the ceremony. It was dressed up in old language, called fate, called necessity, called the will of the stars. But I had spent 3 months in this court, and I knew exactly what it really was. It was murder with better lighting. Alina was the 4th child of the ruling family, not the heir anyone wanted. Her older brother controlled the military, a rival duke controlled the trade routes. Alina controlled nothing but the loyalty of the common people, who loved her because she actually listened to them. That loyalty made her dangerous to everyone else at that table. So the council let the old law stand. Nobody had to lift a hand against her. The ceremony would do it for them, and everyone could call it tradition instead of what it truly was. 5 minutes. "They chose me for this job because I don't buy into your traditions," I told her. "Where I come from, when someone says a thing is impossible to stop, that is usually the exact moment somebody stops it." "Your people are strange," Alina said. "You have no idea. I want to be clear about something. I am not a soldier anymore, not officially. I left that life behind after a war that taught me one lesson worth keeping. Waiting for permission gets people killed. So when the council chamber doors opened and the Sentinel Order walked in wearing their gray ceremonial robes, carrying a device none of them would name out loud, I already knew what I needed to do. I had known for 2 days, ever since I found the ceremony schedule buried under 3 layers of false paperwork designed so nobody outside the inner circle would notice it in time. The head sentinel, a tall figure named Corvain, stepped forward and addressed the room like he was reading from a shopping list. "The princess will now undergo the toll," he said, "as is tradition, as is law." I looked around that chamber. The duke who wanted her trade routes was studying his fingernails. Her own brother, commander of the Empire's fleet, stared at the floor like the marble had suddenly become fascinating. Not one person in a room of 40 powerful beings was going to say a word. That told me everything about how this galaxy worked. Power respected rules, even rules built to hurt the people who had no power to change them. Nobody here was evil exactly. They were something worse. They were comfortable. "I have a question," I said, stepping forward. Corvain paused, clearly annoyed that the hired human was speaking in a room where hired humans were expected to stay silent. "The guard does not have standing to address the order." "I'm not addressing the order," I said. "I'm addressing the room. Does anyone here actually believe she deserves this, or are you all just too comfortable to say otherwise?" Silence. Alina's brother finally looked up, and for a moment I saw something like shame cross his face before he buried it again. 4 minutes. Corvain activated the device, a slim silver instrument that hummed low, and 2 sentinels moved to either side of Alina. This was the part where, in any other story about this court, the human guard would step aside because interfering with the Sentinel Order carried its own death sentence, and no contract job was worth that. But I had read the fine print of my contract weeks ago. It said I was to protect the princess from harm, full stop, no exceptions listed for tradition, ceremony, or ancient law. Whoever wrote that contract had made a mistake, or maybe they had made exactly the right choice without realizing it. I stepped between Alina and the sentinels. "Move aside," Corvain said. "This does not concern you. She's under my protection. That makes it concern me entirely. The toll is older than your entire species. You cannot understand what you are interfering with. I understand a group of grown adults about to end the life of a young woman, and calling it destiny, instead of admitting it's a choice. Where I come from, We have a name for people who hide behind old rules to avoid taking responsibility for what they do. We call them cowards. The word landed hard. A few nobles shifted in their seats. Corvain's gray eyes narrowed. You would defy the order for a contract? I'd defy the order for a person. The contract is just how I ended up standing here. 3 minutes. Corvain gestured, and the two sentinels beside him raised their hands, channeling some kind of energy meant to restrain anyone standing in the ceremony's path. I had seen the schematics for that restraint field in the paperwork I found, and I knew exactly one thing about it. It was built to hold beings who respected boundaries, who stopped when told to stop, who backed away from authority the way everyone in this culture had been trained to since childhood. It was never built to hold someone who simply kept walking forward. The field caught my arm, burned like standing too close to a fire, and I kept moving anyway, straight toward Corvain, until I was close enough that the device in his hands was the only thing separating us. You cannot simply push through the will of tradition, he said, and for the first time his calm voice cracked just slightly. Watch me. I closed my hand over his, over the device, and twisted it away before he could react. 2 minutes still showed on the chamber clock, but the countdown meant nothing without the instrument that powered it. I dropped it to the marble floor and brought my boot down, and the humming silver ceremony piece that had ended the lives of heirs for longer than my entire species had walked upright, shattered into pieces that would never be reassembled. The room went utterly still. Corvain stared at the broken device, then at me, like he genuinely could not process what had just happened. In his world, rules were not broken. Rules were simply followed, generation after generation, until following them became indistinguishable from truth itself. Do you understand what you have done? He asked quietly. The toll cannot be reassembled. The ceremony cannot proceed. Good, I said. Then find a new tradition, one that doesn't require killing people who inconvenience the powerful. Alina's brother stood up from his seat for the first time since I had entered the room. I braced myself, ready for him to call his guards, ready for this to become the moment my contract turned into something much more dangerous than paperwork. Instead, he walked to the center of the chamber and looked at his sister. Really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. She has never once acted against this family, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. She has never taken anything from any of us. We were going to let her die simply because keeping her alive was politically inconvenient. I have been ashamed of that for a long time, and said nothing. The Duke, who cared about trade routes, opened his mouth to object, then closed it again, seeing the room shift beneath him. Alina stepped up beside me, her hand finding my arm, not for support exactly, but like she needed to confirm this was actually happening. You broke centuries of law in under 6 minutes, she said. Where I'm from, that's considered a productive afternoon. She laughed, actually laughed, the sound echoing through a chamber that had been built for solemn ceremony, and had never once heard real joy inside its walls. Corvain, still staring at the shattered device, finally looked up at the two of us. The Sentinel Order will need to reconsider what the toll means, he said slowly, like each word cost him something. Perhaps it was never meant to be a sentence. Perhaps somewhere along the way we simply forgot that. That happens, I said. Old rules get comfortable. Somebody has to come along and remind everyone that comfortable doesn't mean right. 1 minute left on a clock that no longer controlled anything. I stayed in that court for another 2 years after that day. And in that time I watched Alina step fully into the role nobody thought she deserved, guided by people who finally remembered that tradition should serve its people, not the other way around. The council learned something about humans they had not expected. We do not bow easily to the idea that some things simply cannot be changed. We have never been very good at accepting inevitable, not when inevitable means someone we care about does not get to see tomorrow. The clock on that chamber wall still hangs there today, stopped at 1 minute and 40 seconds. A reminder to everyone who walks past it that fate is only as strong as the people willing to let it happen. I was never willing. That made all the difference.